So, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of In Conversation With. My name is John Lunn, aka Jonnychipz, and in this video series we talk about all things cloud with experts and advocates from right across the tech industry, covering a vast array of topics from skills and careers through to technical how-to videos and personal thoughts and opinions. So, whether you're watching this on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, LinkedIn, thanks so much for tuning in. It really is appreciated. Please do take part in the chat below. Drop us a comment, a like and a subscribe if you can. It really would be appreciated. Okay, so whether it comes to learning and building new skills to begin a new career in tech or changing the focus of your current career and aiming for the cloud, we know that the choice and direction is plentiful in this industry that we love. The fast pace of change of the seemingly never-ending carousel of technology trends can make even a seasoned veteran in the industry wince every once in a while. But my next guest is here to help out, not only from working in the industry himself for the last couple of decades, but from the position of an Azure MVP, a Microsoft certified trainer, an author, a vlogger, a podcaster, and a huge community contributor. As if that wasn't enough, he's also the CEO and founder of the amazing cloud training provider cloudskills.io. So he's here today to help us out with our career, put on supercharge by reinventing the way that we view our careers. So I'm super excited to welcome my next guest on In Conversation With. It's the amazing Mike Pfeiffer. Welcome, Mike. How you doing?
I'm doing good, John. Thanks a lot for having me on the show. Super excited to be here. Hey, everybody. What's up, everybody? I'm really excited, man. This is fun. Thanks for having me on the show.
No, absolutely, Mike. And it's a pleasure. Obviously, I've been wanting to reach out to you for a little while to get you on and do a talk, on this show, because I can see some of the awesome stuff that you're doing across the community and obviously everything you've got going on with cloud skills at the moment. So, I mean, before we jump on into all the goodness, I don't know, for those that don't know you across the community, if you want to give yourself a little bit more of an intro, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you said, I've been in IT a couple decades. I started in a help desk back in 1999 at Gateway Computers, company that had the cow boxes, if anybody remembers them. And, I got my MCSE that time in my career. I got out of the help desk, went into consulting, and I've been kind of just doing that stuff ever since. I spent a couple of years along the way doing software development, and I've been an enterprise consultant and worked in all kinds of different capacities, worked at Microsoft, Amazon Web Services. And today, I run cloudskills.io. So our main goal is to do training, technical training. Started out as kind of a hybrid consulting company and doing some training, but mainly the thing that we do today is help people ramp up, build up their skills, and basically either switch over from one area IT right now into cloud, or start their cloud career from scratch, which obviously is much harder to do. So it's a really interesting time, tons of opportunity. That's why I'm excited about it. And, like I said, it's been a couple decades, so I don't want to go into it in too much depth. I'm sure we can talk about it in the conversation, but it's kind of my story, if anybody doesn't know me.
No, absolutely, Mike. And I think when we last spoke, I think I mentioned to you, I remember reading your blog articles from about 10 years ago now.
That's right.
Is it really, do you feel that old? Surely not.
I do. Absolutely, dude. I really do.
No, you and me both, matey. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so if anybody has you must have worked on Microsoft Exchange. So there was a period of my career where I just focused mainly on Active Directory and Exchange. That was about 12 years ago. So early 2000s, early 2010 era, I was doing tons of Active Directory and Exchange stuff, and I was blogging about Exchange a lot back in those days. So some people remember me from the Exchange days as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's just a weird thing, isn't it? The industry is so small, and you've got those, MVPs and community folk that have been doing this for such a long time that, when you turn to it yourself and you stumble upon one of those people, you think, I remember the face, and I remember reading something. It's just, it's crazy. But at the end of the day, it's kind of relevant to, I think, what we're going to talk about now, in terms of, how we used to build our skills up, Mike. I mean, I don't know about you, but, when back in the day, you talked then about, if you know anything about Exchange, if you've done some installations with Exchange or Active Directory, is it true that we kind of knew where we were back in those days? And I say that as probably a little bit of a loaded question, but, I mean, what's your take today, Mike, when we transition to the cloud? It's a bit of an open-ended, general sort of question, but are things more complicated than they are, than they used to be? I mean, what's your take on it, Mike, at the moment?
Yeah, it's real interesting. I've had this conversation with a lot of people lately. When I started, it was pretty much you could kind of like handle everything if you really wanted to. And once I went off the help desk and had my first consulting job, I worked at a very small mom and pop. It was a small ISP and computer, consulting firm in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and they worked with companies, real small, 5 users, 10 users, sometimes 100 users, but very much a small business kind of boutique consulting company. And when I was working there, I could just do everything. I could do the networking, I could build the workstations, I could build the servers, I could go to a customer one day and, after I built the machines, install everything, network the computers together, support the end users, all that kind of stuff. And obviously now, you can't get your arms around everything anymore. So I think that, the biggest thing that's changed for me is, I got to learn every day. I'm constantly every day trying to keep track of what's going on, what's still relevant, where is the gap in my skills, what do I need to continuously work on. And it's tough, man. It's kind of like being an athlete. It reminds me of like, you really want to crush it in your career, you kind of like got to almost have like protocols and like training, kind of systems, because there's so much stuff coming at us these days. So, I'm a little concerned in a little bit of a way, because it's just like, I think that the industry isn't really set up for it yet. Right. And I think we're figuring that out right now. But I think that, we need new ways of learning, and we need to really encourage everybody that's in this industry, like this is the new way of doing it. We have to come together, unify, and find new ways of learning and continuously improving. So, it's an interesting problem, man.
No, I was going to say, Mike, you kind of said that quite succinctly. I think one of the terms I heard not too long ago was, obviously we always talked about this work-life balance, and it seems that it's changing now to become a work/learn/life balance, that we've somehow, it's that give and take, isn't it? I think, again, I don't know about you, Mike, but I hear the word learn, and it's about, studying through, lots of exercise books, doing, test exams, sitting exams, going to test centers, and, passing to get that accreditation. I mean, we're still in that kind of zone, I'm presuming. We're still in that area, but it's just the plethora of choice and the wide selection of choice that probably is upon us now is the difficult thing to navigate, is it?
Yeah. And I think the people that are really having a lot of success in the job market right now are people that are good with dealing with ambiguity. They can kind of like figure out how to like do this stuff on their own. But everybody knows, especially, at these bigger corporations, they know that's not going to be sustainable. We need new ways of, supporting people in their learning journey. And so I think that, we haven't figured it out yet. I think it's a really interesting problem. To me, the blended learning kind of style is the only answer that makes sense. And what I mean by that is, different types of training modalities and different ways that you learn, not just sitting by yourself in a room watching videos, but also doing labs and, interacting with people and socializing your learning. I think that, it's hard to do that. And when it comes to connecting people together, that's a lot of logistics. It's really hard to do. So that's why, big training companies can't really do that yet. They haven't figured it out. So like I said, people are still, it's evolving. We'll get there, but man, it's an interesting time. So that's kind of my take on it right now.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And yeah, I think, I'm in agreement with you. The industry somehow doesn't feel ready for what we're almost running down the road after at the moment, which is this constant stream of information and change in data and change in services and features and functionality. And it's, it's almost information overload to a certain extent. And, and like you say, it's a cool insight there that you think that people that are good at dealing with ambiguity can kind of feel their way through. But yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, have you got any kind of insights as to, this kind of blended learning? You mentioned, obviously, almost learning on the job, learning in various different modalities. Are you starting to see any companies, change the way that they kind of help their staff along with those kind of things?
Yeah, it's starting to happen. It's it depends on the size of the company and the industry that they're in. So I am starting to see that, the framework of having kind of like a hackathon, right, is a good starting point. But like I said, it's still early days. So I think probably one of the most popular examples of a company giving their people time to learn on their own would be Google and their whole like 20% kind of model where they're like, hey, we'll give you a fifth of your time to ramp up on stuff. I don't know exactly how that works anymore. And there was always like, people saying, well, I don't know if that's really true. But what I'm getting at is that's kind of like what companies are going to need to figure out. Not necessarily here you go off by yourself for 20% of your time, but here's how we've figured out how you can learn and work, because that's they go hand in hand at this point, right? And so yeah, I've seen some companies doing a pretty good job of starting that process. And I think that, kind of like hackathons, kind of like going through stuff in cohort-based learning experiences is going to be a big thing in the future.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've managed to land on a few of those Microsoft open hacks. So they kind of like open hacks around, various different technology areas. But I mean, just to pick you up on the point, when you were talking about your early career where you kind of knew everything, you were kind of, in arguably a small enough company where you kind of had to know everything. You were dealing probably with smaller customers. And, I guess we learned that over the expansion and, the size of IT organizations, those roles kind of got split out across, sort of networking, storage, compute, virtualization. And somehow now with cloud, we seem to, I joke with people quite regularly, I'll joke or say it as a matter of fact that, when we shifted over to things like, SaaS platforms, in particular things like 365, we kind of almost had to become pseudo security specialists almost overnight, because no longer were we dealing with the productivity suites such as, Exchange, like we mentioned earlier, or Skype or Teams as it now is. But we had to deal with all of those security things that kind of went around it and learn them and actually work with customers on those. How does your take look in terms of what we're actually having to learn and what we're actually having to skill up on now? Is it that blended approach across what were traditional technology stacks now, or do you still see that there's opportunity for those kind of towers of specialisms?
I think there is. I think there is ways people will be able to specialize, but I also think that because of some of the technologies that are being put on a pedestal, it's going to drive people into learning things that are completely new to them. Good example is, just traditional infrastructure focus now having to know way more about software development. That to me makes a lot of sense, right? Not necessarily having the capability to go into the weeds and build something completely from scratch, like Instagram or Facebook, something crazy like this platform, but just having enough awareness around software development and what developers do and how, APIs work and how the HTTP protocol really works, things like that. There's a lot of merit in learning those things that might seem like there's no relevance right now. If you've been doing server administration for a while, you might not see any relevance in learning that stuff, but I believe there is. So I would say, in the short term, over the next few years, we have to keep an open mind, because, the world is becoming way more, I guess what I should say is the platforms are very developer centric, right? Yeah, we've got all these, IaaS services and stuff like that, but long term, I think we can all probably understand that we're not going to want to do VMs in 10 years from now, right? So I would start to learn a little bit more about emerging patterns and have an open mind, but also there's a good chance that some of that stuff may not last. I don't know, what I mean by that is like building Kubernetes clusters and like really going deep into Kubernetes, being like a certified Kubernetes administrator and really knowing the guts of building the clusters, that may not serve you in 10 years or 5 years, but then again, maybe it will, right? So that's where we got to kind of keep an open mind. But when I think about it, like going back to Exchange, remember when, especially like 2010, 2011, 2012, building Exchange clusters and, doing DAGs and all that kind of stuff, it got really complicated. And then next thing you know, it just made sense to go to O365, you know what I mean? And now it's kind of like almost what everybody does. And there's very little support and very few people doing that on-prem, So that's kind of like what I see as some of these technologies, like Kubernetes is a good example. I could see that going down that road where it's just it's a managed service and, you don't have to go that deep into it. So anyways, what I'm saying is I don't think the industry even knows right now what it is going to want in the next few years. And I think we all have to keep an open mind and kind of branch out a little bit, especially in the software development space, just to get awareness around what are devs actually doing and how can I, just be able to communicate with those folks and understand what's going on and chip in somehow.
No, absolutely, Mike. I think you're right. I think sometimes we're all searching around for the answer, and sometimes the answer isn't there. And maybe that's where we're at the moment. We're almost forging the answer in doing our daily work and our daily learnings, and it will, it's that thing, isn't it, that eventually we will get de factos in certain areas where something will rise to the top and become the way that we kind of do things. And I guess we've just got lots of stuff happening at the moment. I mean,
Yep.
on that note, Mike, are you seeing a little bit of a trend as to, or have you got any insights or hints and tips over, maybe for somebody looking to come to cloud, or I guess maybe that traditional infrastructure person looking to transition over? Are there any kind of key core skills that you would probably point them at to start off on?
Yeah. So I think anybody that's an infrastructure person right now is got a leg up because, and I've been saying this for years. So if you've been listening to me in the past, this isn't anything new, but when it comes to cloud, there's mainly four pillars that I think of when somebody's coming in from scratch, which are compute, networking, storage, and security. And if you're an infrastructure person right now, you already know how that works in your world, whether that's on-prem or in whatever virtualization platform you're using. And so that's just a matter of taking what you already know and coming into the cloud. And those four pillars will do a lot of, that'll give you a lot of perspective of, oh, okay, I know how the VMs work in the compute pillar. I understand container services and things like that. I understand serverless functions. And you get into networking, or all right, I get the virtual networking stuff. It's kind of like what I did over here. Same thing with storage, same thing with identity and the security story. So that, I think, people that are infrastructure focused have a much easier, I think, path coming into cloud, because if you're a developer and you haven't been doing cloud, all that infrastructure stuff is really, blowing your brains out. So if you're already an infrastructure person, you've kind of got a leg up there. What I would do though for everybody, no matter what, is once you get past understanding those core services, then it's like, how do I actually do deployments? How does CI/CD really work? How does version control work? How do I get into GitHub and start doing that? And those are the software patterns where an infrastructure person might get really, knocked off kilter, where a developer is like, hey, this is my home. I know this world very well. And so for me, that's what I think is like, especially if you're infrastructure focused, take your skills now, bring them over into these main pillars, and then learn the software patterns. Once you know, all right, I can do all this stuff in compute, networking, storage, and security. Now, how do I model that in code? How do I do Terraform and things like that? And how do I get that into a repository? How do I do a pull request? How do I kick off a deployment with GitHub Actions or something similar? Those are the things that I think, if I was interviewing somebody and they came in and they were talking about that they'd been doing that, I would be really impressed as a hiring manager, because I need that. I want to automate, and I need you to understand those basic components. So that's kind of like high level. And then if you follow the certifications, I think that's also something that'll help you focus, because there are role-based certs that all the providers are doing, so everybody, I think, knows that at this point. It's probably watching a show. You could be, certified administrator, certified architect, certified developer, certified DevOps engineer. So pick a lane that you want to be in, map over what you already know, and then be open to learning more about software practices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, it's great advice. And I think it's really interesting because I think, in talking about that at a high level, you're right. Kind of everybody has seen the way that the cloud providers have set up their certification platform. And it's quite intriguing, actually. Even this week, we've had another announcement from Microsoft about some exams, roles-based exams that are coming out around what I guess has probably been a little bit of a gap since the industry turned cloud focus, which was, from my point of view, everything went cloud quite quickly, and I say quite quickly. It was actually over it's been about 12, 15 years, maybe something like that now. But really, obviously COVID has kind of escalated that. But I mean, in terms of certifications, those roles-based certifications that the cloud providers have got now, they have very much been that almost cloud native. You need to know the goings on in the cloud. I mean, we hear hybrid talked about quite a lot now, certainly by Microsoft, is that there is always a hybrid story. And let's not forget, on-prem, as much as maybe the marketing literature would like it to go away overnight, is probably not going to be going away overnight. There's still going to be, a huge amount of that. So it's quite intriguing now to see that these hybrid certs are coming out. Windows Server certifications are coming back out from Microsoft by the end of the year. I mean, have you got any perspective on that, Mike, in terms of, what's your feeling? Are we going to go all cloud? Are we going to stay in this mixed bag of hybrid? Have you got any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I would like to just kind of encourage and point out about that, that Microsoft's bringing back these, or at least trying to do more hybrid, right? This new Windows Server Hybrid Administrator cert and all that, that was largely done because the community put pressure on Microsoft. They're like, hey guys, like we still got a ton of on-prem stuff, like it's not going anywhere. So I think if you ask people that are out there, they would say, hey, like it's going to take us a while to get out of on-prem, right? So my thought is hybrid is going to be a thing for a long time. There's going to be lots of companies out there that are going to be in a hybrid situation for a decade. And, we can't ignore that. We can't pretend like it's not there, especially and we can't let Microsoft or Amazon or Google, whoever, off the hook of not even talking about that. And so this was a good example of the community pushing back and saying, nope, you guys got to give us more than that. And so that's why it's so important to pay attention to what's going on, to get in the game of just being involved in the community. You don't have to lead, but you should be, following guys like Jonnychipz and, being in the community and paying attention to what's going on, because you might, have an opportunity to chip in and say, hey, listen, I don't like that idea either. You guys need to be doing this. So yeah, long story short, absolutely hybrid's a thing. It's here to stay. And, don't get worried like it's going to be overnight. And then if you're a provider, if you're a cloud platform employee listening to this, think about that. I know marketing is like an important part of selling your stuff, right? But we can't pretend that on-prem doesn't exist.
Yeah, and I think sometimes there are certain subjects that are a little bit taboo, I guess, in the community, or like you say, with particular vendors, they might not want to talk about it in that way, or in this case maybe it is. I don't know the backstory, but I'd certainly seen over the last few years that there was a lot of outcry, the fact that kind of server had kind of been forgotten to a certain extent, and we know that we were dealing with it on a daily basis. And I say to lots of people that I think it's quite easy to forget as well, working for a particular vendor or being at this kind of cutting edge in terms of community, that you turn around, and it's certainly the world that I live in. You're working with companies that literally are 10 years behind what you're talking about. They are a decade behind, and I always promised myself that I would never forget that. So I think as much as we try and crack the whip and say, come on, everybody needs to keep up, keep patching, and certainly trends have changed with, certainly with client OSs and keeping them evergreen, or at least trying to. There are a lot of companies that just kind of aren't there yet. And, I guess that part of these hybrid kind of certifications to try and show that there is this step. I guess
so, but also I think there's another side of this coin, right? Which is, if you get complacent and you're like, I'm not going to the cloud and I'm just going to do hybrid, you're just left with what the vendors are building to support the on-prem story, right? So it might not be as feature complete as you need. So, there's that too. So I wouldn't say that it's all, I'd say that's both, right? It's like we need to support hybrid, but also we need to recognize that the best support is going to be cloud first in the future. Yeah. So that's kind of how I see it. But you're right.
Well,
there's so many companies that will always be a decade behind. And man, that's really got to be a hard place to be. And I know somebody that works in the government sector that's dealing with stuff from a long time ago. Yeah. And it makes it really hard to innovate,
Oh no, absolutely, and it's not, obviously in this day and age, especially with the fast pace of change, I it's not a great place to be if you're in a business or a public sector organization dealing with that. I think we can probably all agree with that. But again, it kind of goes back to that point that you raised earlier about what should we as individuals be learning and skilling ourselves up in. Equally, I wouldn't mind betting that there are a lot of businesses that probably don't know the skills that they need to take them to the next level, because they kind of haven't necessarily kept up to speed with technology from that sense, and they've been too busy working on their own business, and for whatever reason have just gone a little bit out of date on their infrastructure and application base. So I mean, I guess that kind of turns to the next track, Mike, in terms of tech careers and kind of how do we kind of get ourselves geared up, ready to take our career, to the place that we probably should all be wanting to take it to. And like I mentioned before we started this recording, you did a podcast on your own cloudskills.fm podcast show, and you were really talking about that, taking your tech career to the next level. I mean, do you want to tell us a few kind of salient points from that talk that you gave? What does that mean? Why should we be interested in taking our tech careers to the next level. And how do we go about that? What do you mean, Mike? Could you take us through that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. By the way, I forgot to mention Cloud Skills FM in my intro. So yeah, that's my podcast. Episode number 127 is the one that you were talking about. Yeah. And so that was kind of like me. There's a couple of things with that. Number one, that was the story of how I reinvented my career. Because just like we mentioned a few minutes ago, I was doing Exchange in, pretty much exclusively in 2010. I wasn't really working on anything else. And, but I did see the cloud coming and I was like, geez, man, I need to switch. And I had seen that before when PowerShell was basically built into the Exchange 2007 product. So when it was in beta, everybody was freaking out because like, oh my gosh, there's like this PowerShell thing. What is that? and so I lived through that, and it was easy for me to see where everything was headed. I'm like, all right, this cloud thing is going to be big. I need to get in front of this. But how do I like completely reinvent my career? I'm already 12 years in or whatever, 10 years in. So that was kind of hard, right? Because there's all this mental stuff that you're thinking. You got your identity mapped to all these things that you're doing in work. So that's kind of tricky. And then it's just like, how do you navigate it? So anyways, that episode was about that. So pretty much the punchline of the episode was that, not only do you if you do want to make a switch, right, and move from one area of IT to another, which in this case would be from somewhere else in the cloud, you got to commit mentally and want to do that. And then recognize that it's going to be a lot of work and you have to have some kind of routine or protocol to get there. And as I went through the episode, I kind of talked about how, treating your career like a business and doing the things that a business would do to define the vision for the company and operating values along the way. And so basically the episode was about doing that for yourself. Like, what's your personal mission? What are your values? And like, what is going to be your routine to make sure you can pull this off? Because it's not going to be easy. You're going to be challenged incredibly. You're going to need energy to pull this off. You're going to need time, right? You're already stretched for time. Like, how are you going to figure this out? So it's really, to me, strategy, but also tactics. It's like big picture, like where do I want to take my career? But then also like, how do I do it in the day to day? And I got into that a little bit, right? But that's kind of the big idea, taking ownership over your career. Nobody's going to do it except you. If you wait around for your employer, if you're sitting there right now and you're working on stuff that's from 12 years ago, just like we were talking about, and you're like, man, when am I going to learn the cloud stuff? When am I going to learn Terraform and all this other stuff? Well, if they're not giving it to you at your current company, like that's on you to figure out how to do that. And when I wanted to go off the help desk in 1999, I didn't wait around for them to like put me in the game. I went and got MCSE certified on my own, which means I had to buy computer parts out of my own pocket to build PDCs and BDCs and all this stuff. And it wasn't easy, right? I was studying on my own time. And, but that, I mean, to me, like, that's what taking ownership of your career is all about. And so that was what that episode was about. And if I could say anything for anybody listening right now, that's what I would recommend. Don't wait for your employer to map out the next decade of your career for you. Start thinking about it now.
And as I said to you before, Mike, I think I did watch that episode. I watched it on the YouTube. She's got a YouTube link, and obviously I saw the slides that you put up, and for me it was obviously the link will be in the notes that accompany this video to that episode, and I would absolutely encourage anybody that is in that frame of mind to go and take a watch, because I found it, as I said to you, Mike, I was watching it thinking, do you know what? For years and years and years, I've had these little longing thoughts and uncomfortable situations where, like you say, you see new technology coming along, you think, well, I'm not working on it at the moment, but I've got this gut feel that I feel that that's the way tech is going to go. How do I? And somehow you just kind of find your way around it. Like you say, if your company's not offering that to you or not offering you projects to kind of start at a junior level and work your way through the ranks, so to speak, then yeah, it is on you. And how do we find the time? So, I mean, I guess for me, the key takeouts for that were you talk about being disciplined. You give a few kind of key things around. One that caught my eye really and perked my interest was this. For years and years and years, I've always said that I was a generalist, and I still feel that I'm more or less a generalist in the IT arena. But when we move to cloud, being a generalist is almost now becoming a specialism of its own. It's kind of a weird backhanded way of saying things. And I noticed that you said something in there about kind of almost that, I'm just trying to think of the terminology that you used at the time, but it was almost like the whole master, jack of all trades, but a master of none.
Yeah.
You can kind of, I think you use the word dabbler. You can be a master of something, or you can dabble in it. And now, what's your take? What does that mean? Because I think for me, I looked at that and I thought, right, I could absolutely be the dabbler. But equally, I know there's certain areas that I know that I'm the master, and that may be in terms of my own ethics, the way that I work. But, what's your take on, can you explain what you mean by that a little bit, Mike?
Yeah, I love that you brought that up. So, there is, and I've been guilty of this too, right? There's a lot of people out there that get excited when they're learning something new, right? This thing comes out, you're like, ooh, this is really cool. You start playing with it, and a couple of weeks goes by, and then the novelty wears off. You're like, oh, okay. And then you go find something else and play around with that. Somebody that's committed to mastery, like really mastering something, will just consistently continue to show up, even if they don't feel like it. So there's a lot of times where I have to come in and like do stuff and I don't want to. I'm like, I would much rather hang out on the couch and watch this, but I've got the intention set. I've got my schedule set up. It's like, I got to show up. You know what I mean? And so like somebody that's truly mastering their craft is somebody that, just relentlessly consistent, just keep coming, and they show up even if they don't want to. And they're not in it for the dopamine hit. And that's what the dabbler is in it for, just trying to, basically get a feel good out of it. Right. And it's like, ooh, that was cool. That was a lot of fun. But, mastering whatever it is you're working on, there's going to be times where it just sucks, and you just got to grind through it. And to me, that's the biggest difference. The master is like ridiculously consistent over a long period of time. And I think that, and I bet, you know this well, John, you've been in the IT industry for a long time and you've been doing this show for 9 months. It's like, you probably didn't just get into it like, oh, I'm just going to do this show for a month and then that's it. And I'm great. Right. It's like, you have to keep doing shows. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like that's, to me, like that's the biggest thing. And the people that, sometimes don't get what they want when they're dabbling around with too much stuff. That's why they're just doing it when it makes them feel good and they're not showing up when it doesn't.
Yeah, and that is probably more of I don't know, it's probably more of a wider, grander kind of statement than anything, because I think that relates to not just the cloud industry, not just tech, but that relates to the core of a person. I think with that kind of that mindset is and I agree, and certainly I'm as guilty as the next person of being that shiny new technology. I'm going to take a look at that. And I suppose I am very mindful that I'm going to take a look at that, but I know I've got a to-do list as long as my arm. And I know that me taking a look at this is going to take focus off. And sometimes I'm very conscious, but I'll still do it anyway because I want that dopamine hit. I want that. I want to see what that shiny new thing is. But it's such, I think, Mike, for me, that was just such an important thing for people to kind of take on board, because it now, at least it makes sure it's almost like that, the known unknowns, that I think it was Donald Rumsfeld's statement, where if you don't know where you're going wrong or why you can't get something completed, just that statement alone for me is enough to kind of sit back and go, okay, I'm about to take something else on that's completely new to me. Am I going to just play at it for a few weeks or a day or two? In which case, that's great, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you may take the focus away from that thing that you probably should be running down the road and trying to get to that mastery kind of level at. So I think, calling that out was just such a cool thing, to kind of a moment of realization to go, that's exactly what's going on here. It's that thing of sometimes, you hear the statements, running around with your hair on fire, you've got too many things on the go, spinning too many plates. At some stage, you almost need to come back down and try and get rid of the noise to say, right, this is where I'm going to go. Now, in that same talk,
one thing to that?
Go for it.
Cut in real quick. I just wanted to point out something you said that was like spot on, which is that concept is nothing related to tech, and it's more about just knowing yourself as a human being. It's like knowing your tendencies, right? And I think it's really interesting if you look at what Microsoft Learn is putting out. Like, they just put something out last week on, I forget exactly what it was, but it was something soft skills related, like building self-awareness and things like that. And pretty much what I'm getting at is we all are going to have to become way more mindful, because we've never done this before. All the stuff we're trying to do, we're just being pushed to our limit. And that's why I said earlier, kind of like at a train, like consider yourself a corporate athlete in a way. It's like, we have to become more mindful about, just our tendencies and how to get past things like this, because we're just going to continue to be stretched for more time, more commitment, more delivering the goods, So I just wanted to point that out. It's very much figuring out those little things that are unconscious to you right now and bringing them into your consciousness and be like, oh, I need to think about this going forward.
No, absolutely, Mike. And I think the other thing that you were saying, obviously, around, doing things when you absolutely don't want to do them, that hits me, on quite frequently, more frequently than people probably realize. It's just, why do you do the same thing? And it's around that kind of, I suppose, that desire to, you picked on the example of creating these videos. Now, for me, I've kept a consistent thing on a weekly basis of, I will do these videos and I will release them. I will do them. It's not just about, for me, the great, cool people like yourself, Mike, that I get to chat with and I learn and get the, cool insights. And I believe you me, I get so many great insights from the guests that I have on this show. Yeah, that's a positive for me personally to do these videos. The other thing, the second thing being that I can share them with the community and other people can glean those same insights. That's great. But there's a whole bunch of other skills that I'm kind of, I guess, using that terminology, trying to master, which is, the art of, video production and editing and timekeeping and organizing, all of these kind of softer skills around something, not necessarily technology. However, when you move those skills and transfer those skills over to those tech areas, all of a sudden, that's when I feel you've got the complete package, if you want to call it that, and that's, in my head, that's what drives me to do these kinds of things, is that you almost push yourself outside of that comfort zone to do something that isn't necessarily you, or you don't have the tendency to do. Like, I wouldn't ever be talking on a camera, by, in any other situation, so that was me pushing myself into a different area to kind of try and learn. And you don't know what you're going to learn. You don't know, I guess for me, it's not knowing the insights that you would pick up and the other benefits that come with that, which, look, you probably couldn't quantify before you go into it. It's such a strange position, I suppose. So, after that long monologue from me, Mike, I mean, you talked in that video about kind of, discipline and, you mentioned earlier, you've got a schedule to keep to. I mean, have you got any kind of hints and tips on how do we get around that time where we absolutely don't want to be doing something?
Yeah, it's hard, man. So for me, the way I do it is all my most intense analytical work is done in the first part of the day, and I get up really early. And I know not everybody wants to be in the 5 a.m. club and that kind of thing. But for me, it's pretty much, people are harassing me all day, starting around 8 in the morning. And I mean that in a good way, but it's like I'm busy, right? So I get up real early and I have my own time in the morning to where I can work on my own stuff because, I got still got tons of commitments running a company, my own business and everything. But, there are things in the future that I want to do that don't map to what needs to be done today. And I'm planning for that first thing in the morning. So, if you're listening to this and you're like, man, I don't have any discipline to learn this stuff, I'm like burned out by the time I'm done with work at end of the day. I would say move your study in the beginning of the day, work on yourself first. When you got the most energy, you got the most mental clarity, work on that and then go to work, especially now when you're working from home. Hopefully, if you're working from home, hopefully that, you can get some time to be alone with your thoughts and think about, what do I need to do this week, this month, this year to get to the place that I want to be? And so that's kind of step one is I would say focus on yourself earlier in the day. And if you can only get 30 minutes, let it be 30 minutes, but just be relentlessly consistent in that, So that's kind of one of the bigger ones. And in terms of discipline, I think once you get going, you start to realize, you kind of get into, what's the word I'm looking for? There's kind of like a homeostasis, right? I'm sure when you first started, right, it was probably man, I got to learn this stuff. But once you get into it a month, it gets much easier, right? And I think that we forget that. It's once you get going and you got a couple of weeks under your belt, a few weeks under your belt, it's going to become easier, And so I think that if you were to set a goal of something you've never done before, like Jonnychipz, like I'm going to do this show and he's still going 9 months later, or even if it's just like, oh, I'm going to get in the best shape of my life or whatever and play that out as long as it needs to go, you end up surprising yourself. And you're like, man, I didn't realize I could be that consistent and be that disciplined. So it's kind of like you got to just jump, and then the trust will come later after you show up and do the work. And then you'll start to trust yourself. Oh, I did show up. But it's a tough nut to crack, man, because, all of us want to take the easy road anytime we can. It's just human nature. You got to like really have a strong reason to keep moving forward. So that's what I would say.
And I guess by easy road, I think, is just by staying with what and staying in your comfort zone, which, look, at the end of the day, it's not for everybody. And there's no shame in that. I guess there's no issue with that. I think, like I say, the thing that for me, from a personal perspective, is myself turning to the community a bit more over the last sort of 18 months now. I know the benefits that's given to me personally, but equally I know the benefits that it's given to the company that I work for and to other people. And it's almost like, when I watch your session on that kind of supercharging your career was, absolutely treat your career like a business, like you mentioned earlier, is focus on yourself, because you're investing in yourself. Now, if you can be the best person that you can be, and it sounds, I don't ever like speaking in cliche terms, but I think I've learned so many cliche terms over the last 18 months that I'm actually do you know what, they're not really cliche terms. They genuinely are things that if you want to dig down into them and, like you say, surprise yourself, just get on and do these things. Take the words of Mike Pfeiffer, who's on the show now, and listen to what he's saying, because it is such a it's almost like a eureka moment. I think you find, I don't know if you found it yourself, Mike, but like you say, you keep turning up to do these things, and all of a sudden something just clicks and you think, right, I know where I've arrived at the point that I didn't realize I was going to get to,
Yep.
So
I love that, man.
It's such a strange feeling, I guess, which is why I was super keen to have you on the show and talk about it, just to get your take on these things. Because, so I mean, other things that you mentioned in that kind of episode, obviously people will go and watch that now, but things again that I kind of stand behind to a certain extent, things like personal branding, kind of creating a vision for yourself, and moving forward with that kind of determination. I mean, have you just to kind of finish off this little section around that career, kind of supercharge your career, do you have any key takeaways on the whole concept of personal branding and what that actually means?
Yeah, it's if you look at what all the higher ed institutions are doing, like in business, like especially like certificate programs and stuff, they're teaching personal branding because they know it's so important for people going into the business world. So even though it's uncomfortable, even though it seems kind of weird, you really need to have some way where you're branding yourself. Because just like we mentioned a second ago, like treating your career like a business is insanely practical. Like Jay-Z says, I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman. His personality, his personal brand is a business, right? And it's the same thing for you, because if you're completely, no one knows who you are, then you got to like go to the job market and convince them to hire you. You got to sell them on the idea that you're the right person. But if everybody already knows who you are because you're out there doing your thing, then it gets much easier, and you get to like order your job off a menu almost like you're at a restaurant. And it doesn't take that much. I know that sounds probably like, oh, I would never get to that level. But especially this last year, I've seen so many people that just do basic stuff on LinkedIn getting hit up because they're out there and they're basically raising their hand and saying, hey, I'm cool with like learning in public and I'm doing it. And then recruiters are just coming after them. Hiring managers are hitting them up. I've seen numerous people, I can't even count how many, get jobs where they like, like double their salary or switch over from some place and go work at a big MSP or end up at Microsoft or Amazon or a huge consulting company like Accenture or Avanade, KPMG, all these huge places, by just simply filling out their LinkedIn profile, putting a nice picture, putting their bio, and then being out there, engaging with the community, sharing what they're learning, and then, engaging with the other folks that are doing the same. That basic amount of personal branding just on LinkedIn or even Twitter or something like that makes a huge difference, And if you don't have a GitHub profile right now, that is a huge mistake. You need to fix that. If I was hiring manager on an engineering team, like that'd be the first thing I was looking for on your resume. And there's so much out there. There's no excuse not to have one anymore. Even if you're not a developer, you should have a GitHub profile. You should have a couple of repos in there with some infrastructure code of some kind to show everybody that you're in the game. And like I said, that basic personal branding, even though it's uncomfortable, like I'm watching people just crush it with that.
Yeah, no, and it's like I say, I mean, it's certainly that's what I found is that everything you've just said is absolutely true, 100% true, and I can't kind of echo that strongly enough and kind of pass it over to other people, because yeah, it's just that small amount of investment, that small amount of effort. You don't have to do crazy things like set up a YouTube channel and start recording every day and things like that. Absolutely not. You can stay as you are virtually, but just do those small things. And there's some great insights and some great tips there. Thanks, Mike. I think
absolutely
just to kind of
and do it now while the job market's super hot. It's like you could really sneak your way into an awesome job. Not, you know what I mean though? It's like the opportunities are massive. That's why I'm talking about it so much right now. Is I want everybody to do more of it.
I think we see the same over here across the pond as well, Mike. I think it's just so many businesses are wanting to get into this space at the moment, and let's face it, we talked about the skills gap in tech for a number of years. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but at the same time, cloud skills seems to be certainly. It's the hot topic of the last of COVID, really. Shifting applications and infra into cloud services for people to work from home. Businesses are screaming out. There's so many businesses absolutely, kind of looking to hire so many roles at the moment that you're right. I think, I know what you meant by sneak your way in. You can be a proficient person, but just get yourself known, get yourself out there, and there are so many opportunities. It's almost unreal.
Mm-hmm. Start before you're ready is what I always tell people. Just start before you're ready. You'll figure it out as you go.
No, that's such. And do you know what? I think if somebody had said that to me 2 years ago, start before you're ready, I probably would have gone, I don't get it. I don't understand what you mean by that. But now, after the last 18 months, 100% understand what that means. It's just invest in yourself effectively. Do the things that keep you motivated and passionate, excel at them as best that you can, and invest in yourself.
Yeah, and then you know what else I would like to just touch on? You said it earlier where you were like, you just felt like you had to do the show, right? Like, or something. You felt compelled, right, to do it. And that's what I would say to everybody listening. It's like, what is your gut telling you to do? And listen to that. I think we get distracted by like, oh, you're supposed to go do this thing over here, and everybody's telling you what to do. But like, listen to the voice in your gut that's like, hey, you should be doing that, because that's a hint. And when you follow that, just like you did, John, now you're like finding all this stuff. That's what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just I know it's another slightly cliched thing, but it is super fun once you get into it, and once you get going, it almost doesn't become like this chore that you might think it is at the beginning. I've got so much to learn. I've got this mountain to climb, so to speak. Once you mentioned it earlier, Mike, once you break down that initial couple of weeks worth of effort, and it is hard graft, and there will be those times that you absolutely don't want to do it, but just turn up, just do it. Like you said, just carry on and power through. And, before you know it, the things that you didn't even realize could happen will start happening, I think is probably the best way to put it.
Yeah.
I mean, Mike, this, I could probably go on speaking to you for another couple of hours, Mike, because, I always find your podcast so informative and compelling, and, you're right on the money from my point of view with everything you've got going on at the minute and what you're talking about. I mean, quickly from a cloud skills point of view, what have you guys got going on there at the moment in terms of courses and, what you see the hot courses being right now, and how can people kind of reach out to you and find you?
Yeah, so anybody can go over to cloudskills.io to see kind of what we're currently up to, depending on when you watch this episode. What we're currently working on, we've been working on this for a little bit, is we're building a bunch of content for LinkedIn Learning that's going to be on Cloud Skills and on LinkedIn Learning. And cool. I've got some live events that might or might not involve Tim Warner. So there's some stuff coming. So I'll be announcing stuff later. But we're just kind of doing what we've always done, which is classes and training that involves the community. We're big on community interaction, involving the students, getting people together, working on stuff in small teams or on their own. And we'll kind of see where it goes. Personally, I am spending a lot of time as well on Kubernetes. And so there's probably going to be some Kubernetes content from me, certification focused, next year that I'm working on. I've been doing Azure content for a long time, and I'll continue to do that. But I just wrote 2 books over the last couple of years with co-authors for Microsoft Press on AZ300 and AZ303. So that was a big deal. We're filming a bunch of stuff on Azure architecture for LinkedIn Learning and cloud skills. And so now I think in 2022, I'll be spending more time like digging into Kubernetes in much greater depth than I have before, just because I think that there is a huge opportunity there. Obviously, the skills gap in the job market is significant. And so I think that there's a lot of opportunity there. So that's kind of like what you can expect to see from what I'm up to.
Oh, that's cool, Mike. No, absolutely fantastic. Yeah, and I'm sure people will, if they're not already following you, will start to follow you. So, no, thanks for that, Mike. Now, I mean, in terms of one final question, I always like to ask all the guests that come on the show, really. It's a little bit of an open-ended question, but it's just to get your gut feel on things. Why are we doing all this, Mike? Where are we going with technology? What's the next big thing for you in the next 5 to 10, do you think?
That's a good question. I think... I don't know if you've been watching what Facebook and even Microsoft have been talking about, the concept of the metaverse and having basically having a virtual reality world where you can go in there, interact with other people, you can buy stuff from different brands while you're in it. So it's basically a 3D virtual reality version of the internet, right? So if you go out there and Google what is the metaverse, you can read up about it. But I mean, imagine being able to sit in a meeting in Tokyo with somebody, and it's just like you guys are all in the same room, but you're not. I'm here in Phoenix, and you know what I mean? So I think that, and with the amount of money that's getting pumped into that concept from the likes of Facebook and Microsoft and others, I think that space is going to be insanely interesting going forward. So I think that now that we're all kind of like stuck at home, anything that connects us out, on top of the existing internet is going to be huge. Collaboration, virtual reality type of solutions. So real interesting stuff is coming. Imagine being able to design your avatar to go into this metaverse concept, knowing what you've seen with like, what's that service that can like mimic your voice now in Azure like perfectly. And there's like deep technology and stuff like, where are we headed with that? I don't know. Maybe in 20 years, we'll just be in there and you can't even tell that it's not, I don't know.
It's like the Matrix, isn't it, Mike? Isn't that where we're all headed for the Matrix, aren't we?
I guess so.
We're all going to be,
apparently.
and you're going to be Neo. You're going to be the one there that's awoken.
No, I'll be Morpheus, like helping somebody else. But I think that's really fascinating, man. That and I think that it's a byproduct of us being completely disconnected and distributed now. And I think it's like the coolest way to leverage the existing internet that's there. So there's a big a relationship with blockchain and going down the crypto road with all that. So that's something I would explore. It's something that I'm kind of looking at right now, keeping an eye on for long-term stuff. But yeah, anything that brings us together and unifies us, I think that's going to be, probably something that's going to be a big deal.
I think that's such a cool way of putting it, because you're right. You've had a really strange 18 months, I guess, as a world. That the world has been kind of thrown into this state of where we are, and we may be burnt out with video recordings and virtual meetings, but. Yeah, I think, I like the thought of, this whole HoloLens thing maybe, or virtual reality headset, and, where that could take us to some of the
even the augmented reality stuff is super cool, man. It's like, even if you just had glasses on, it's like you could see like, a menu of like, I don't know, just whatever. I think it's insanely cool. That stuff's going to be hot. So just a lot of capabilities there, a lot of potential. So, watch that space for sure.
Yeah, become one of the upstarts now. So get your business started now and reap the rewards in about 5 or 10 years' time, I guess, isn't it, in that space? But so much, there's huge opportunity, and I like your thoughts there, Mike. I think that'll be a cool space to kind of keep an eye on, like you say, over the next it's kind of here already to a certain extent, I guess, isn't it? But it's only going to get more mature and more intriguing. But Mike, thank you so much. This has been, such a fun episode to record. Hugely appreciate you giving up your time this evening. Well, this evening for me, and I guess the morning for you. No, it's been super fun. Thanks so much for joining me today, Mike.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Thanks, John. We'll see you next time.
Yep, I'll catch you soon, no doubt, over the socials. Thanks a lot, Mike.
All right. Take care.
Bye now.
Bye.